Hello there, and welcome to the Dead Zone. I go by Sloken, and I'll be showing you my Izzet deck that I made recently. First off, I am going to warn you that I have proxied some cards into this deck, so I'm going to show cards with pieces of paper on the front of them, and I'm going to tell you what those are, but that's why they're a piece of paper. But first off, I'm going to show you the land I'm using for this deck. It is a burn deck, so I'm only using 8 basic islands, and burn decks primarily don't need the island part of that, so I am running 12 mountains. Now, the artist I like using is Young Yao Han, but that doesn't really matter too much. I am running 4 steam vents for this, making a total of 24 land for this deck. The reason I'm not using Sulphur Falls is because, well, frankly, I don't have them. Now, next, I'm going to move on to creatures, instants, and sorceries. First off are 4 Goblin Electromancers. They make everything in the deck much cheaper, and with a deck that relies a lot on spells, he is quite important. Another creature that's quite important are the 4 Gutter Snipes. That way, whenever you search your deck for anything or play a card that lets you counter, you're doing damage to your opponent over time. Now, Mercurial Chemister, he's primarily in here for his ability to just draw cards. And if all else comes down to it, he's a good defender. Melik, the Izzet Paragon, is a great card for this deck, primarily because he lets you show the top card of your library. Now, for most players, that really isn't all that much of a big deal, but when you're running counter spells or burn spells, that lets your opponent know you have something and makes them a little bit more on the defensive side of should I play this spell. Another good card is Niv Mizzet Draco Genius. I'm only running one of him, and the reason for that is he's the guild leader, 6-drop, and his ability is I only really need one of him on the field. And moving on to the instant spells. I'm running 4 Shocks. That's 2 damage to target creature or player at 2 mana, so you can see that it's quite, useful. I am proxying in 4 Syncopates. That spell right there, especially if you have not Gutter Snipes, but Goblin Electromancers on the field, will instantly let you choose the X to be 1 through 4, depending on how many you have, and then you can just add mana to that, so you can say counter that unless you pay 6, or just 1 above the amount of mana that they actually have, making it a really useful spell for your deck. I am running 4 of the Izzet Charm. That's another one I had to proxy in for now, but the Izzet Charm gives you great versatility, so you can counter unless they pay 2. You can do 2 damage to one of their creatures, or you can draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, letting you filter what you have in your hand. Sure, you are around 1 card down, but hey, it's useful for what it does. Running 4 Turn and Burn. Now, if you're absolutely down to it, it's, okay, they're swinging at you. Turn that, burn them for 2, or turn that creature, burn it to make sure it doesn't stay around. So 4 of it is a really good opportunity to show how they work. I am running 4 Inspiration. Now, I was running Divination, but I noticed that with Divination, I was still running it around turn 4, but I was losing 4 mana because I had to play Divination during my turn just to draw 2 cards. So replacing it with Inspiration, I'm still playing it turn 4, but it's at the end of your turn, draw 2 cards, making it much easier to get around. Now I'm running 2 Cyclonic Rifts. Cyclonic Rift is a really good card just to, wipe their field. I'm only running 11 creatures in this deck, so wiping their field of any permanents that don't really get affected by my cards is a good thing. I'm running 1 Mizzium Mortar because it is a sorcery, and pay 6 to overload it to deal 4 damage to all their creatures. And granted, that's a really good card, but one of it is just fine. And I'm going to be running 2 Ralzeriks, another card I had to proxy in. But Ralzerik fits this deck better than Chandra. Chandra was in this deck originally because she is my favorite Planeswalker, but she didn't really fit the essence of this deck, so I added in Ralzerik. I mean, who's better for Izzet than the Izzet Guildmage turned Planeswalker? Now that's it for the normal deck. That is 60 cards with 24 mana, so total of 60 cards with 24 mana in it. And next is going to be my sideboard. I'll put one glaring spotlight in the sideboard just for those people who run the ability to add hexproof to their stuff. Hexproof really does kind of put a damper on things when you can't burn their creatures, or you can't just say, okay, Mizia Mortar that one guy that you don't want there. So moving on, one Epic Experiment. Epic Experiment is a really good card. Red, blue, and X, and then exile the top X cards of your library to the exile the top X cards of your library and pay any of those instants or sorceries among them with X as its converted mana cost. Especially for this deck, when the most expensive sorcery card ends up being a 5, you just pay 5 extra mana, making it a total of 7, and then you can play any instants or sorceries from among them. So it's really, really useful. Annihilating Fire, I'm running 3 of that, and that's for extra creature removal, just in case I'm facing someone who doesn't really run that many creatures that are small enough for shock to hit or turn and burn to really be effective against, because you don't want to waste 5 mana on it. But also against those junk reanimators. I know on my FNM we see a lot of junk reanimators, so exiling those creatures is a really big thing. Now against life gain decks, I put in 3 Skullcracks. It prevents them from gaining life this turn, and it does 3 damage to them for saying, you know, hey, instead of gaining life, boom, take 3, and it's really kind of funny. Now a card that everyone kind of disses on around here, but I really like, 1 Firemind's Foresight. With this deck, I can grab any number of possibilities with it. I can decide, okay, I can grab turn and then grab burn as well. So it's 2 turn and burns right there, and then a shock. Or I can grab a turn, a burn, and then a syncopate, or anything I really want with that. I am running 4 Counterflux. Counterflux is great against those people that run counters, so whenever someone does run a counter deck against me, I can decide to just counter everything they've got, or in 4-person matches when people are having counter wars, overload it, counter all their stuff. My deck does run 11 creatures in it, so I added in 2 dragon shifts into the deck just in case I need to have that one final swing with a bunch of 4/4 dragons. That card is not really all that great, but it's a just in case method. I have also considered adding Cryptborn Horror into this deck because I can deal damage in 1 turn, play Cryptborn Horror, he comes in with a lot of counters on him, and maybe add in some Spell Ruptures because he'd be so big and then it'd be harder to counter him. But with his trample, life gain decks would not be able to stand up too much. Now that is my sideboard. It is still a work in progress. I mean, it's by no means perfect. But if you guys have any suggestions, leave them in the comments section below. And remember, this is the dead zone. So whatever you do, don't die too quickly. Wow, that's cheesy. Guys.